Greetings. This is Paulford speaking. Welcome to my show, Dissolve. This show is all about change. A big change that happened to me on the 20th of March, 2022. Change. Yes, change is a theme. Change. Now, how can I describe that change? How can I describe that change that happened to me? Well, when I was a child, my mother used to tell me a story about a bird. I hated it. It was a stupid story. Didn't even make sense. But anyway, it was about a bird that lived on the lower branches of a tree, and it pecked around on the branches, eating little berries, having a sort of crap life. But one day, it noticed another bird at the top of the tree, standing there, all beautiful and radiant and serene, and it was fascinated with the beautiful bird, and it wanted to get up to the top branches to be near it. But it would always get distracted by eating berries and not go up. As I say, it's a stupid story. I hate it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Paul, why are you telling us a story about a bird speaking to us from an undisclosed location? Well, the answer is because it's a metaphor. Yeah, because I don't know whether you know. Yeah. But, I don't know whether you know this, but I'm at the Soho Theatre, and it's one of the most prestigious venues in the local area. And if I don't have a metaphor, I'll be crucified by the critics. Do you know, there's always a critical face in the crowd, isn't there? There's always a critical face in the crowd, and tonight it's you. Yeah, I can see what you're thinking. You're thinking, Paul, can you not possibly find a way to start the show that is not a convoluted, ill-advised allegory that is tangential and difficult to grasp? That's what she's thinking. And I've got to say, if you said that to me, I'd have a lot of sympathy with you. Yes, the bird, it was pecking around on the branches, eating the lower branches, remember? Having all the little berries. But then the berries, it made it feel sick. It kept eating more and more berries, and the berries made it more and more sick, and the berries made it more and more unhappy. And then suddenly, it noticed the beautiful bird at the top of the tree again. And it thought, oh, yeah. And it went up, right to the top of the tree, where the beautiful bird was. And it went right up to that bird, and then it kind of merged with it. And then it realised it was the other bird all along. Right, this bit is just appalling. I hate that. That is the bit of the story I hate the most. Look, what do they mean it merged with the other birds? You can't have two birds merging, can you? I mean, doesn't make sense, does it? Like if there was only one bird, what was eating all the berries then? It's an absolutely ridiculous story. Anyway, that's the best way I can explain it. The change, best way I can do it. So we're ready to start now. So we're going to start the show now. Change. Remember the theme. Change is the theme. I'll go up there, just pop up. This is the stage where I'll be doing the show from here, see? Change is the theme. Remember the theme. Change. Will you welcome to perform the show Dissolve? It's Mr. Paulford! Thank you. Everything's always changing, isn't it? There's so much change, isn't there? There's more and more change. And people are very afraid of it. They're always saying, it used to be something, now it's something else. People are increasingly afraid of change. I preferred it how it was, really. The young people these days, this is what they say, the young people these days, they've lost the ability to have a proper conversation. They're always on their phone. They don't even know how to play bridge. But has it occurred to you, a 68-year-old carpet salesman with gout, that maybe they are able to have a conversation, they maybe just don't want to have one with you? Maybe they don't want to sit around for the next half an hour listening to you go on about how the Brexit dividends are going to come through the next 35 years. While we desperately try and confirm a lucrative trade deal with Vanuatu and North Korea. Here you go on about, ooh, in our day we could say whatever. It wasn't all woke in our day. And isn't it sad what happened to Prince Andrew? They're not interested. They've got different priorities, such as how to avoid strangling themselves while doing the latest TikTok trend, where you have to tie a concrete breeze block to your head and throw it off a motorway overpass. They don't want to listen to you. Like, have you ever even seen a modern phone? It's got so much more to offer them than you. People don't like change. They don't like change. I was talking to my neighbours recently. They're in their 70s. And they said to me, I read in the paper... Well, it was the Daily Mail. They said, I read in the paper that they're asking men if they're pregnant now. What? Anyway, I delved into it. I got to the bottom of it. What it was... there was a story. It was a man, he was about 57, and he was giving blood at the blood donor centre, and there was a form he had to fill out. It's just a standard form. And on it, it said, are you pregnant? And he refused to answer. It was like, oh, I'm a 57-year-old man. I can't possibly be pregnant. Like, I mean, I've given blood loads of times. I filled in that form, God knows how many times. I don't think I've even noticed that question. It's quite simple, really. All you have to do is just tick no. It's not that complicated. It's quite simple. It's for health reasons, because they can't take your blood if you're pregnant. So if you're not pregnant, just put no. That's all you have to do. I'm a 57-year-old man. Why do I have to do this? I never had to do this at the old times. I remember in the 80s, you didn't have to bother with all this red tape. You could just turn up at the hospital with 3 pints of blood in an unmarked plastic bag. There was none of this checking it and all that. There was nothing that went wrong in the 1980s from not adequately screening blood. No, just pour it in the vat and use it. Well, that'll be Brussels, probably. You know the sort of man I mean. Anyway, so he refused to give the blood, and it was a story in the papers. But you sort of think, what does he expect? I mean, it's just a standard form they give to everyone. Is he saying he'd rather that they had a separate form for men and women at a considerable extra cost to the NHS, just so men don't have to answer that question? It's a pretty fragile masculinity, isn't it? If you can't possibly have a form that says, are you pregnant? And then just put no. Just in case someone were to sort of see it from a distance and say, excuse me, but I couldn't help noticing that you were answering the question, are you pregnant? And I just wanted to inquire, are you ticking no? Because from the angle I'm looking, sort of with the sun in my eyes a bit, it looks a bit like you might be ticking yes. What does that mean? What's going on? Are you gay? What are they so scared of? It's also worth noting at this point that I am a gay who gives blood. And until quite recently, gay men were not allowed to give blood. And people like this man were not interested in making a stand then, were they? But anyway, that's not funny, so it's not in the show. And what about postmenopausal women? Yeah, we're back into the comedy now. Yeah, should they have a different form too? Oh, I can't possibly say whether or not I'm pregnant. I'm postmenopausal. Can you not notice? Can you not notice the heat radiating from my undercarriage? It's simply not possible. I've gone through the change. And what about people who are infertile? You know, barren people. And on that note, what about barons? I am a baron. Why should I have to answer the questions of a common phlebotomist? I am the 4th Earl of Dorchester. Whether or not I am pregnant is my own affair. Anyway, my point is... My point is, things have always been changing, haven't they? Like, for the entirety of human history, things have been changing, and there have been people complaining that things are getting worse, while by and large, things have constantly been getting better. And I know it doesn't feel like that at the moment, the world at the moment, it feels a bit sad, doesn't it? But, you know, things have basically been improving, and there's just been people constantly moaning about it all the time. I mean, you know, in 1658, there was someone saying, have you heard of these doctors they have now? Society is going down the toilet, which, incidentally, we haven't invented yet. But when we do, I'll be totally against it. Well, why should we have to go to the doctors? In our day, when we got sick, we would just say a prayer to God and then promptly die. And can you imagine the outcry in 1701? Yeah, you've guessed it. In 1701, when Jethro Tull... A few more people getting it now. In 1701, when Jethro Tull invented the seed drill. It's all very well for you to sit there laughing about it smugly. You're familiar with the seed drill. I wouldn't be surprised if you've seen hundreds of them. At the time, people they'd have been in a riot state about it. They'd have been saying, oh, I think it's disgusting. And then to add insult to injury, only 8 years later, some bastard invented the piano. What's next? The clarinet? Yeah, it was the clarinet. Yes, the order was seed drill. Are you concentrating on this? The order was seed drill, piano, clarinet. If you learn nothing else tonight, learn that, memorise it. And in 1785, when Jean-Pierre Blanchard invented the first working parachute, as opposed, obviously, to a non-working parachute. But actually, when you think about it, a non-working parachute is literally anything that isn't a working parachute. For example, a table. That would be an example of a non-working parachute. A pair of reading glasses. A faulty parachute. That's another one. Another example. And a concrete breeze block hurtling onto the fast lane of the M6 with a 14-year-old head attached to it. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the people who are against change, the people who are afraid of change, they hate it in every context, don't they? Everywhere there's change, they're against it. They hate it in every situation, except one, climate change. Yeah, they don't mind that, do they? Ooh, it's a disgrace, isn't it? You can't say filthy bender bum boy up the arse anymore. Oh, the Arctic tundra's melted. Not a problem. And it's ironic, isn't it, that the Christian right, they believe so strongly in fossil fuels, but they don't actually believe in fossils. And the word trigger. Nothing triggers these people more than the word trigger, does it? Oh, you've been triggered, have you? In our day, we just said we were a bit upset. Yeah. In our day, we didn't have mental health. We would just get angry. And either punch someone in the hip or struggle for years with unresolved emotions. Alienating one's family slowly over decades, whilst consistently putting down your adult daughter. Until everyone you loved loses interest in you and you die alone in a hostel in Ashton-under-Lyne. We wouldn't get triggered. Yeah, you're right, it's a silly word, but I'm not sure it's your principal problem, Derek. There's a lot to absorb, isn't there, from that bit? There's a few people having a little titter, thinking about some of the highlights. Were you thinking of Jean-Pierre Blanchard, you think about it? So, this is my show, Dissolve. And the reason I'm doing this show is because 2 years ago, an amazing thing happened to me, and I thought, I've got to share it with people. Basically, I used to suffer with depression. For nearly 30 years, I had just crushing, all-encompassing depression and anxiety. And it was so difficult to live a normal life. I mean, I managed to have a career and do professional things, but my personal life, it was terrible. It was like I was half alive. I felt like I was living half a life, and it was awful. And I tried everything. I had therapy, and I had medication, and they kind of worked, but then they kind of didn't. And in the end, I felt so trapped. I felt stuck, and I didn't know what to do to get better. And then, on the 20th of March, 2022, at 4:59 p.m., a completely unexpected event occurred. I was driving along a road, Riga Road it's called, in Fallowfield in South Manchester, when suddenly it felt like my consciousness just like expanded like 100 times. And it's difficult to explain what that felt like, but it felt like a kind of silent explosion in my head. And it lasted about 3 seconds. And it felt kind of really violent, but kind of really peaceful all at once. And nothing much happened. I mean, to look at me, you wouldn't have seen anything. I just carried on driving. But I just knew in that moment that the depression was just gone, that I was no longer suffering. There was no more pain. It was over. And it's still like that. I mean, it's amazing. It was as if it was as if the electricity in my brain just kind of short-circuited. Not just the electricity, though, the actual chemicals in my brain. That's what makes it so amazing. Like, I mean, I used to have antidepressants because I didn't have enough serotonin in my brain. And I really needed that stuff. Like, if I didn't have that medication every day, I'd be really ill. And then suddenly, in those 3 seconds, my brain just completely reorganized its own chemistry. I don't know how that works. I mean, it's amazing. I've no idea how that happened. But there are a few reasons, I think, why it happened. And to try to understand it, we have to go back to the beginning. when I was 8, I went orienteering with my father. Because I should explain, you see, my father, he was a very funny man. He's still alive, he's just not funny anymore. Nowadays, he mostly goes on about Brexit and brings his own bags of blood to hospitals. But in the early 80s, he was really funny. And he was really funny in a kind of panicky way. Sort of manic. He was always kind of panicking. And you can imagine the combination between that and orienteering was a disaster. I mean, it's not too difficult orienteering as long as you need to keep calm. And I was only 8 already. I'd already kind of worked it out. I said, I've worked it out, Dad. We have to go 45 degrees that direction for a quarter of a mile, and then we follow the next instruction. But he was incapable of doing that. He was just saying, I don't know what to do, son. I don't know what to do, son. Even though I was telling him what to do. And we got lost, and we ended up at a caravan site. It was so embarrassing. He was just banging on caravan doors, just shouting, help us, we're orienteering. He was so shaken, and someone had to drive us home in a caravan because he was too shaken to drive, and he had to leave his car in the Iceland car park and pick it up the next day. He got fined £35. It was a disaster, terrible. And about a week later, I was chatting with my dad, and he said, do you remember last week when we went orienteering? I said, of course. I said, obviously I remember. I'm kind of traumatised by it. And he said, do you know, we're going to go orienteering again. He said, there are 2 types of people in the world, son. There are people who try something and they fail and they give up. And there are people who try and try again until they succeed. And he said, we are those people. And I thought, how inspiring. So anyway, he got on the phone to the orienteering man. Meanwhile, I was checking something on the television, but I couldn't hear anything, so I kept putting the volume button up, but I still couldn't hear anything. Kept pressing the volume. Still no sound. Well, you've guessed it. I had the mute button on. Yeah, I know what some of the young people here will say. Surely, as soon as you press the volume, it'll knock the mute function off. But yeah. Oh, you've got all the questions and answers, haven't you? But I'll tell you. Remember, this is the early 80s. They hadn't worked that out yet. The remote control, it was much more primitive than nowadays. You're on the wrong lines there. The point is, doesn't matter about the argument between me and that man, it's not important. The point is, the television's right, it's now, remember, it's primed for maximum volume. So I realised I've made a mistake. I pressed the mute button and the volume, I mean, we had never, ever heard a volume come out of it so loud. I mean, it was such a massive noise. The sound of it was overwhelming. We didn't even know it could go that loud. It was from radio rentals. It's just frightening. I was quick on my reflexes. I quickly pressed the volume button to get it down to a reasonable level. But it was too late, because my father, he just panicked, because he was on the phone to the orienteering man, and he just said, oh my God, he said, my television's exploded. And he put the phone down, and we never mentioned orienteering again. Anyway, that was a long time ago when I was 8, so it's probably not actually relevant to the story. I think I've probably gone back too far. Because, you know, it's difficult being a teenager, isn't it? It can't be easy, can it? Think of the pressures of being a teenager. There's a lot of worries. Your body's changing, you've got peer pressure, social media, your GCSEs, you've got the stress of worrying about your future and how you're going to do in life. You've got the worry of constructing a series of unusual buildings in the shape of triangles. Well, I know what you're thinking. You think, well, what was that last one there, Paul? That was a bit weird. What are you talking about? Building a load of unusual triangles. That's not something that a teenager would need to be worrying about. Well, try telling that to tragic teen lad, King Tutankhamun. Imagine the stress he was under. He'd have loved to just relax and just concentrate on his Spanish oral. But instead, he was having to worry about the construction of a friggin' sphinx. He'd have killed for his biggest problem to be, Charlie Jacobs has called me a slag on TikTok. That would be the least of his worries. You could think about that the next time you see a group of teenagers causing trouble in a park. You could do what I do. You can shout at them, "What about King Tutankhamun?" You've got it easy compared to King Tutankhamun. He had all the problems you've got, and he also had to deal with the destabilising influence of the cult of Aten. Drumming up civil unrest in the slums of Cairo. You think it's hard doing GCSEs? Try making a marriage work, aged 14, while suffering from rickets, typhoid, and a number of other diseases they haven't even worked out what they are yet. They're still testing the mummy. Like next time you see a group of teenagers and they're all like, my uncle's visiting next week. It's really boring. I have to talk to my uncle. Yeah, boring it might be, but at least he's not trying to plot your downfall. Trying to start a new dynasty with a frenzied series of assassination attempts. Why don't you have some of the soup? No, you have the soup first, uncle. The point I'm making is, people don't understand depression. I was talking to a friend a while ago, very well-meaning, but stunningly ill-informed. Like so out of touch. You know that way people are. In that way that's kind of seems quite caring on the surface, but it's massively patronising. And I said to her, Jane, I'm so depressed. And she said, Paul, I totally understand how you feel. I totally understand you. I cannot overemphasise just how much I completely understand what you're going through. Yes, a friend of mine had depression. Like, it's not even her. Yes, a friend of mine had depression, and what she found helped her was buying a small bolt hole in Tuscany. I don't know if any of you have ever suffered with severe mental illness. I'm sure some of you have. But for me, anyway, it's like you're trapped in a soundproof glass box while you watch your life happen outside. And you're watching, you're there, but it's like it's happening to someone else. And I had some really wonderful things that happened to me, and some opportunities that people would give their right arm to have. So I knew I was lucky, but I didn't feel a single bit of joy from any of it, because it wasn't happening to me. I was looking at it from inside my glass. The glass that I'd built to block out something terrible that happened to me when I was a child. But that glass was also blocking out any possible joy that could possibly get in, while the pain and sadness still got through. I tried to explain all that to Jane. And she said, "Have you tried going for a run?" I think what happens is, I think people confuse mental health with mental illness. I mean, they're not the same thing, are they? Like if you wanted to improve your physical health, you might decide that going for a run could help. But if you had a serious physical illness, then jogging wouldn't be the answer, would it? Oh, Clorinda, sorry about the cancer. eating away at your juicy little pancreas. Had you considered the Salisbury Half Marathon? No! Do you even know what depression is, Jane? Do you know what it's like, Jane, to be so depressed you can't even get out of bed? And do you know what's not possible when you can't get out of bed? Pilates classes. FML, babes. I'm in a glass box. A human being is not supposed to live in a box. Now, that is the brutal reality of how I was. However, I am a comedian, and living in a volatile, irrational, traumatic state for nearly 3 decades can also be quite funny. I mean, these days, mental illness and depression are getting a lot of airtime, aren't they? But I don't think enough people are talking about the upsides. Like one time I was in Greece and a bus driver stole €2 from me. He did like a trick with his finger. Went like that, €2 is gone. Trick with the finger, the classic bus driver's move. €2 gone, €2. Greek bus driver. And at the time I thought, it doesn't matter, it's only €2, you know, I mean, I'm on holiday. Don't let it affect the holiday. I took it in my stride, you know. But then later, I got really angry that I hadn't done anything. In fact, I was actually angry with myself for not having been angrier earlier. I was like, I'm so angry now, why couldn't I have done that earlier? Anyway, my point is, have you ever destroyed a whole day fantasising about taking revenge against someone who has wronged you slightly? I couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's a brilliant way to spend your one short life. So this time, so the bus driver gets away with the theft initially, but then on the journey, the bus goes through a long tunnel under an active volcano. And when we come out the other side, there's been a nuclear apocalypse, but we've been protected because of the lava, probably, something like that. And it's likely that we're the only humans left on Earth. We have to create a whole society, the 40 people on the bus. And for some reason, it's voted that my job would be to look after the medicines. I don't know why. I don't know why it doesn't make sense, this bit. I don't know why. Because there's actually 3 doctors on the bus. But one of them put herself up to be in charge of fishing for some reason, and the other 2 died quite quickly of chlamydia that they kind of caught from each other. Don't know how they did that. They just sort of made it together. Supposed to be bit of medical knowledge. Get together, make the chlamydia, die. Anyway, 5 years in, the bus driver, who's now in charge of oxen, he comes to me and he says, oh, I've got a terrible injury on the elbow. He said it was the oxen. He said an ox scraped it. I said, so was it an ox or was it oxen? I said, I need to know because it's an unusual plural. He says, that's not important. He says, the point is, I need antibiotics. And every time he comes in, I charge him a prescription fee of €2. And he says, why are you charging me €2, Paul? Like all money is defunct. The global economy was destroyed. We melted down all the coins to make fish hooks for Dr. Monastrano. In fact, to be honest, I don't know why I even bother with the oxen. We live mostly on pike. She's a very good angler. And I just look back at him blankly, with no emotion, and say, €2, please. Brilliant. I mean, some of the things I'd get angry about hadn't even happened. Like, that's how angry I was as a person. They'd be angry about things that they weren't even real things. Like, I'd find myself lying in bed at night, livid about an imaginary hinge date I'd never even had with former Labour Shadow Minister Chuka, in which he didn't even offer to contribute to the bill. I couldn't believe it. I said, Chuka. At one stage, you were touted as a potential leader of the Labour Party. Do you know what I'm talking? Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Chuka, one of the leading lights of the Labour Party at one stage. The level of ignorance on display tonight is stunning. I said, Chuka. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. I said, Chuka. In early 2019, you were at the vanguard of a potential sea change in British politics, which caused you to form your own party, Change.uk. You could at least offer to pay for the starters. I mean, look what I've been through, Chuka. I've built myself into a glass box, Chuka, and blocked out feeling for 28 years. And the reason for it all was because I was sexually assaulted when I was 11. I mean, I only ordered a small mushroom omelette, and you had a lobster inside a partridge, you bastard! OK, so I'm aware that there's an issue to address here. I'm going to lobster inside a partridge, smooth it over a bit. But, I mean, in fairness, I did warn you it could be harrowing. But I imagine that if you're familiar with my comedy, you were expecting something more along the lines of a fictional farmer who gets trampled to death by his favourite heifer because he wants to be an airline pilot and he's always looking up. Something like that. Not the true story of my life, featuring 28 years of depression that originated in childhood sexual abuse, even if it was woven seamlessly into a carefully crafted bit about ex-Shadow Secretary for Business, Innovation and Skills, Chuka. He was a former Shadow Secretary for Business, Innovation and Skills, for Christ's sake. It's one of the most important parts of the Shadow Cabinet. The thing that happened to me, where my whole life changed in an instant, and my lifelong depression was mysteriously and miraculously cured, I'd obviously love to be able to tell you how I did that, or what caused it. That would obviously be a brilliant thing to share in this show. But the truth is, I don't really know. I didn't do it. It just sort of happened to me. And looking back on my life, it seems like a massive example of the butterfly effect, where if any one of a number of events, all seemingly unrelated, some extremely unlikely, from my childhood all the way up to the afternoon of the 20th of March, 2022, hadn't happened, then this amazing thing would never have happened to me. And it's clear to me now that the first of these things was what happened to me when I was 11. I mean, yes, that was the reason I was suffering mentally all those years. But if that hadn't happened, then I would never have experienced what happened to me on that road in Manchester. And I wouldn't be living in the state of joy I'm in now. And that state of joy I'm in, it kind of makes you look at things a bit differently. Because society's a mess, isn't it? I mean, it's so unintuitive, isn't it? Like, from first principles, you'd never, ever design a society that way, would you? I mean, it seems inevitable that it should be like that because it's kind of developed that way over time, but it's not. I mean, the way I see it is we have modernised versions of traditional and archaic concepts that get gradually altered over time. And because everything develops based on the version of it that existed before, it's all rooted in the depths of the past. And I genuinely believe that we should just destroy everything we've got and build a society from first principles. Like, forget everything we know and build a new society, a better society, a fairer society, and a happier society for everyone. I'm talking about a revolution. Dismantle everything we've got and start it from scratch again. I mean, obviously, we don't want to change everything. There would be some things we would want to keep. Yeah, there would be some things from the old system we would keep. I mean, obviously, we'd want to keep the House of Lords. I mean, that's absolutely vital, isn't it? I mean, they're society's finest minds. And we'd want to keep the knights, wouldn't we? Yes, you know, the OBE, the Knights of the Garter, all that stuff. Well, what I'm thinking is, if we're going to keep the knights, we should have them doing what they're originally supposed to do. Fighting wars and that. Sir Paul McCartney evacuating an animal sanctuary in Kabul. Running onto a chopper with a sack of cats on his back. Sir Elton John firing a mortar into a minibus of civilians. Sir Derek Jacobi, walk this way. There's a landmine to dismantle on the Sheffield bypass. What other things would we want to keep? If we're going to create a society from first principles, what other things? Another thing we'd want to keep. You'd want everyone to be massively hung up and livid about gender. All the time for centuries, wouldn't you? You'd never want them to get over it, ever, and just keep going on about gender with preconceived ideas and stereotypes. And if someone, having been exposed to all this, grows up and says, I don't feel I really fit into this very narrow definition of the infinite human experience, that definition confines and diminishes my ability to express my sacred and ancient humanity freely within the timeless and infinite universe in which we somehow find ourselves. Well, obviously, you'd want to say, shut up! And we'd want to keep religion, wouldn't we? Yes, you'd need to keep religion. Yes, we'd want religion. Yes, of course we would. But you'd need religion to be done in a very particular way. Yes, you'd want there to be loads of different religions, all pretty similar, but they all hate each other. And even people who are in the same religion, they all split into different factions, and they all hate each other too. And you'd want all the religions to say that all the other religions are wrong, with no sense of irony. And what about sewerage, you're asking? What about sewerage, Paul? What would you do with that? Well, obviously, pump it into the sea. Best place for it. Next to all the plastic. What other things would we want to keep in the society for first principles? Yeah, for society for first principles. Another. Yes, you definitely. You'd want there to be a powerful liquid that people drink in various forms and flavours, which loosen the inhibitions of some people whilst destroying the lives of others. And occasionally, it would cause people to mount the curb at a T-junction in Stevenage. What else would we want? What else would we want in this new society? Another thing you'd want someone who's going to promote equality. Someone in government who is going to make sure that there was equality in the new society. And you'd want to call them Equality Czar. Like, that's an actual real thing. I can't believe it. That's a real thing. Like, can you imagine the meeting where they decided the name for that role? Where they said, okay, we're going to have someone to make more equality. What word do you think? What name? What about Equality Overlord? No, it's not quite right. Equality Führer? No, it's too German. Equality Rees-Mogg. Stupid suggestion. Now, hang on. I've got it. What about Equality Czar? Well, are you sure you want to call it equality czar? I mean, when you think about it, czars, they were the hereditary rulers of Russia who lived in appalling luxury while their subjects were penniless and starving. And then they were overthrown in a revolution and shot in the face with a bayonet. Are you sure? For the equality brief, at least, we shouldn't just pick a different word. No, I like Tsar. And you'd want allergies and napalm and Apple Watches and the Backstreet Boys and Love Island and racism and deforestation and landmines and credit cards and Piers Morgan and nuclear submarines and bloody friggin' golf. I mean, I can understand certain things. I can understand, for example, why people might want to chop down the rainforest. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying I can understand why people might think that way. I mean, there is a logic to it, isn't there? You know, I'm only interested in short-term gain. I don't care about the future of the planet or the people who rely on these trees. I can make a load of money by chopping down this forest. But golf? Please just stop it with the golf. There's absolutely no reason for it. There's nothing to be gained. Just step away from the course. We would want to keep sport, though, wouldn't we? Yes, we'd want to keep sport. Yeah, we would. Yes, you'd need various games of increasing levels of contrivance and pointlessness that regularly lead to fistfights as 75,300 English hooligans rampage through the town while the mayor of Grenoble has a nervous breakdown. I'm being silly. But there is a point to sport, though, isn't there? I mean, there are other reasons to sport. I mean, one of the other reasons to sport is to give men something to talk to each other about in pubs. You know the sort of man I mean. Because you see them in pubs, don't you, saying, have you heard Arsenal are up in the league? And you're thinking, John, your wife of 34 years left you yesterday. Please, just for a moment, talk about how you feel. I mean, you'd never get that in the female world, would you? That's my point. Like, you'd never get in a pub, Sandra, I feel so sad now Derek's left me, so empty, I'm all churned up inside. Shut it, Denise. Nottingham Forest are up in the league. Now let's play darts. 140. Beat that, you wanker. Shut it, Sandra. My clit's bigger than yours. So, the 20th of March, 2022, at 4:59 p.m, that was the most important moment of my life. Everything really, since I was a child, had been building up towards that moment. 28 years of horrendous depression in a state of suffering all the time, until eventually I found the medication that finally made me stable. And that stability caused me to unearth the suppressed memory of what happened to me when I was 11, and then processing and dealing with that in the years after. And that all led me to the day before the 20th of March, 2022. The 19th of March, obviously. At this point, I'd been stable for about 4 years, so I'd come off the medication because I thought I was better, you know, and I felt I'd confronted and dealt with what had happened to me, and I had actually been doing pretty well. But this night was not going to be okay. And as was so often the case, it was something really quite innocuous that triggered it all off. Basically, I'd been doing a show in Carlisle, And after the show, there was a man in the audience, and he was quite flirtatious with me, and I quite liked him. And all I had to do, really, was just say, do you want to go for a drink? But I didn't. I don't know why. For some reason, I kind of held back. And then he went to go home, and I could have said something then, but I didn't, and the moment was gone. And I just plunged into a deep, dark pit of despair. I was driving down from Carlisle to Manchester in a desperate state, just thinking, if only I could have had his penis in my mouth just for a few seconds. If I could have sucked his cock just for a moment, it would have made me feel so much better. I mean, it's easy for you to sit there laughing. You don't know what it's like to be that desperate for cock. I can see you related. And the worst part about it was that the worst part was that I knew I was back to the bad old times. Like, I thought I was better. I thought I'd dealt with my problems. I thought I was healthy. I thought I'd forgiven what had happened to me. And I'd come off the medication, and I was back to square one. I had no more options to try. I mean, nothing had worked. I'd tried everything, and I was still ill. I felt like I'd run out of road. And then literally, because they closed the M6. And then this really sent me over the edge. Like, not only am I dealing with this sort of existential crisis with a massive lack of cock, but also the sat-nav doesn't understand that the M6 is closed. It's trying to send me back there all the time, and I got lost, and I ended up halfway between Carlisle and Manchester, in the outskirts of Lancaster it was, just driving around at the lowest point I've ever been, just screaming. And at some point in this devastating, depressive episode, something in my brain just kind of broke, I think. And I got to my hotel eventually, and in the morning, things were just a tiny bit less shit. So I thought I'd go and see my friend in Manchester. And I think the combination between my kind of broken, vulnerable state and some quite weird conversations, it led me to have some very unusual thoughts. Like my friend, he asked me a question. He said, would I rather everyone thought I was the best comedian in the world, but I was really unhappy, or that everyone thought I was the worst comedian, but I was really happy? Anyway, I didn't answer the question because it's a stupid question. There's really very little to be gained by thinking about it. It's just a stupid, ridiculous question. But it did make me think, do you know, I could just be happy. I don't have to keep beating myself up about stuff all the time. And then I thought, what does that mean, beating myself up? Like, who is this I who is beating me up? What's going on? And then I thought, I don't have to make myself so miserable. And then I thought, who is this I who is making me miserable? Who are these people? And why is there more than one of them? Because we all have these voices inside us in our heads, don't we? Sort of criticising us, but you sort of think, well, what is that voice? Who is speaking? And if it's just me, why am I saying all that stuff? It's so horrible. I mean, we all have these voices in our heads that criticise us, so we consider it normal. But it's madness. I mean, who would need a voice inside them that says, you better get going, Paul, you won't get to the supermarket now till 6:07 p.m. You'd have been there by 6 o'clock. You'd have been there by 6 o'clock if you hadn't watched the last 10 minutes of Homes Under the Hammer. Don't know why you bother. You never learned anything for the last 10 minutes of the Homes Under the Hammer. You never learned, do you, Paul? You stupid idiot. You'll be stuck in all the queues, and then you can forget about getting to B&Q now to get your hanging baskets. Don't know why you even bother with the hanging baskets anyway, because your whole garden's going to rack and ruin. Especially after what you said to your neighbour, who was going to water all your plants while you were away. Why did you insult her? Why did you say that she had too much loam in her soil? You know she gets sensitive about her soil composition. You always say the wrong thing, don't you? You always say the wrong thing when it comes to loam. Well, she won't water your plants now, and all your plants are going to die. I mean, why? The whole garden's going to go to rack and ruin just because you said the wrong thing to a postmenopausal woman about her potting mediums. Is it potting mediums or is it potting media? Surely you should know, Paul, because it's an unusual plural. You're absolutely useless. You make the same mistake over and over again, and that's why you'll always be alone. And in my broken, vulnerable state, I remember thinking, I don't need to be saying that to myself. Why can't I just be one me that isn't attacking itself all the time? I could just be one me that's happy, like that friggin' bird. And then I thought, well, that's easier said than done, isn't it? And I got in my car to drive home, and it was 4:59 p.m. And you know what happened next. Let's have a bit of humour from the briefcase. We're going to have a disturbance. A disturbed thought from my mind. In case you're not familiar with my disturbances, I call them disturbances because they're all things that I've thought of when I've been in a disturbed frame of mind. And what happens is I have the disturbed thoughts, like normally it's in the night kind of thing. I'll kind of wake up in the night and I write them down, and then afterwards I draw a little picture on the other side to cheer myself up. Like this one here, for example, is entitled "A Horse That Is Quite Friendly But Has All Sharp Knives Attached to It." So those of you near the front, you'll be able to see that there's a pole attached to each leg, and then there's a blade on each pole. If you're at the back, you can't see it, but it doesn't matter, I've just told you what it is. And in many ways, the most dangerous, I think, are the two blades at the back. Because you've got the double-pointed blade there and the scythe. They're probably the most dangerous. And they are definitely the most dangerous, really, because when you think about it, if a horse like this comes towards you and you've got these two spears at the front, your instinct is to duck down, isn't it? But if you duck down, it's disaster, because then you're under the hoofs, and then you've got the double-pointed blade as well as the scythe, the cutlass. So you're in a terrible state. You haven't got a chance. Once you get under those hoofs with the double point of this cutlass, you've got no chance. So in many ways, if a horse like this comes towards you, in many ways, you're better off sort of going against your instinct and just standing there and letting one of the front blades go straight into you. I mean, yeah, obviously it's going to have a terrible effect, but you should be able to find some sort of surgeon who can reconstruct you. You know, I mean, you'll be affected for the rest of your life. You know, people will say to you, they'll say, oh, you're eating that soup slowly. And you'll say, well, yeah, it's very painful eating hot things because I was injured in a terrible injury with a very dangerous horse. And I had to, my intestine had to be reconstructed. I also lost part of the gallbladder, and the pancreas isn't so good either, you know. But I was one of the lucky ones. It's the people who duck down are actually in a much worse situation because there's as I say, they've got the double-pointed one, the scythe, you know. The humour on the other side is unrelated. So if you like the picture, put that out of your mind now. It's time now for the humour from the other side. One of the great things about Jesus is that he not only helps with big things like world peace, he can also help with the small things like a blocked sink. Help me, King of Kings. Help me, King of Kings. These pipes are full of fat. So a glimpse there, change your pace there. It's a glimpse there into the world of the Christian. Because if you're a Christian, you've got a world-renowned saviour on your side. You're an atheist, if you get a block sink, you're on your own. You're a Christian, you've got a deity equivalent of Dino Rod. What about you? What about you? You've piqued my interest. What is your... Yeah, what's your religion? You atheist, or...?
Me?
Yes. You're agnostic, yes. Wasn't the person I asked, but it doesn't really matter, does it? What about you? Atheist, right, yeah. Atheist. I think, interesting, you agnostic, you atheist. I always sort of think of myself as atheist, because I don't believe in God. I look at the world as it is, and I can't see that there's a God looking after us. It doesn't seem like that. I mean, I suppose sometimes I think, well, I can't be certain that there's no God. I mean, scientists say that you can't prove a negative, don't they? So I suppose I can't be certain. So I suppose in that sense, I suppose I am an agnostic. So I would call for a plumber, but I would be prepared for the possibility, however slight, that the Christ might intercede. I mean, it does seem unlikely in a way, doesn't it, that after a 2,000-year hiatus, that Jesus is going to reappear via U-bend. But you never know. God moves in mysterious pipes. I always think that the way Jesus died, spoiler alert, but I do think the manner of his death is an important part of what made him so famous. I mean, crucifixion is a pretty iconic death, isn't it? I mean, would he be worshipped today if he died by another method? Like, if instead of being crucified, if he'd been hung, drawn and quartered? I mean, that was an execution method, wasn't it? That could have happened. Like if Jesus was hung, drawn and quartered, would 2,000 years later churches be all full of paintings of a guy being chopped into 4 bits? And people would go in and say, oh, it's a lovely church, isn't it? Beautiful architecture. Look at that beautiful stained glass window of Jesus' left leg being ripped from the socket. And instead of people making the sign of the cross, they just throw sausages at each other. I mean, it's not the same, is it? I mean, Christianity would have been a harder sell. I mean, would you get in the news, British Airways have been taken to an employment tribunal after they sacked a check-in agent for wearing a silver chain with Jesus at the end of it, with all his guts hanging out. Patricia Scud, 54, said, I used to love working for BA. It was flexible hours and a friendly working environment at Gatwick. But they didn't respect my religious freedom to honour my Lord and Saviour with a miniature model of him with all his organs flapping round his ankles and his nuts pulled down well below his knees. And there's still been massive arguments about it, wouldn't there? Like the Protestants would say, yes, the nuts came down to about the shin. And the Catholics would say, no, the nuts were much lower, it's near the ankle. There'll be massive arguments and wars about how low the nuts went. So we're getting right towards the end of the show now. But before we finish, I have to tell you that there's more to this story. This isn't just a show about recovering from depression. I mean, it is that. That did happen. But there's more. I've missed something out. I haven't told you what happened 6 minutes before the event at 4:53 p.m. Basically, I was saying goodbye to my friend in Manchester, the one who asked me the stupid question. And he said to me, he said, did you realise you were calling Lola by the wrong name? She's actually Lila. And I was a bit like, you could have bloody said something. I've been calling her the wrong name for the last 2.5 hours. I was a bit annoyed. I was annoyed. And I can't quite believe what I'm about to say, but it's true. that was 22 and a half months ago. And that was, to this day, that is categorically and unbelievably the last time I ever felt any negative emotion of any capacity. I mean, if you can believe that. I mean, I can't really believe it, but it's true. Like, since that day, I've been honestly in a state of complete happiness at all times. I live completely in the moment. I have no worries or concerns about the past or the future. I accept everyone and everything without judgment. The trauma and pain that I'd been carrying around with me since I was 11 is gone. It's forgiven. In those 3 seconds, it all just dissolved away. And that internal voice criticising me is gone. I am one me that's happy, like that bird. And it's not just the big things, it's the little things as well, like impatience and irritability. Like I used to be so impatient and irritable, and I just knew that immediately, even in the car after it just happened, I knew that they were gone. In fact, I was so confident that I was no longer impatient or irritable that I called my mother. And she told me a story about a woman in the village who I've never even met. And it all tied into some dream she'd had. And it went on for about 20 minutes. And I was just completely calm and happy and just pleased to be hearing it. And then afterwards, I thought, wow, I've just listened to that. Anyway, there's a word for this thing that I'm talking about. This thing that happened to me, there's a word for it because people know about it. It's happened to people before. Basically, what's happened is I'm friggin' enlightened. Like, don't worry, enlightenment is not a big deal. I mean, yeah, the Buddha did it. Yeah, the Buddha did it, didn't he? And he made a hell of a fuss about it. But it's not just the Buddha who did it. It's not just some spiritual thing. You know, it happens in the brain. And I guess because I was so tortured for so long, I guess something in my brain just kind of broke. And I guess my brain just sort of reset itself. And I went sort of through to some other mode of existence. I don't know. I'm aware it sounds unbelievable, and I'm sure there'll be some people here who think I'm talking garbage, and that's fine. But I'm not. This has happened. This is how I am. I'm friggin' enlightened. Deal with it. And I don't know what else to say, really, apart from that this state I'm in, whatever you call it, is for everyone. Anyone can get it. It's easy. I mean, all I had to do was get sexually assaulted as a child, plunge into severe depression aged 19, struggle for a quarter of a century until I received powerful medication, meet with a shattering series of crises, then come off the medication, deteriorate, rely on a chaos theory-style procession of increasingly unlikely coincidences, and then have a massive breakdown on the outskirts of Lancaster. That's how I did it. But my point is, that's just one of the methods. You don't have to do that. There's loads of ways to do it. What's happened to me is a connection to everything. It's a loss of ego. It's the death of longing. It's an acceptance of every moment. It is the end of suffering. And it's right there. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being on my shoulders off. Thank you.